Thank you, Abbott. Thank you, everyone, for that warm welcome. And I hope you'll enjoy this evening. We're going to take a look at an opera by Wagner. It's his last opera, as he's told his wife when the opera was turned over to the publishers, "That's my last card." Of course, that was in German. I don't know how to say it in German. But maybe Lisa does. I think you're studying German now. Okay. I think it'd be interesting to note that, Bob, I'm pleased to see you. Here's one of the world authorities on the Beatles, by the way. Absolutely, he is. I'm pleased to be here and to talk with you about this opera, but I want to back up a little bit. When you're enjoying the well-prepared hors d'oeuvres before hors d'oeuvres earlier, music was playing. It's a 14-minute section from Act 3 of Wagner's Parsifal. It's known as the Good Friday spell. It's sometime you have to listen to it. It's transcendently beautiful and a very powerful and moving moment within the opera itself. And I think you may want to listen to that on your own, and with or without the actual singing. There are little DVDs like this called the Parsifal Suite. This came out about a year or two ago, and Matt and I were trying to find it on Amazon. How were we looking for that?
Amazon.
Yeah, and we only could find the DVD. This is a suite from the opera without any singing. So you can really focus on the astounding music. There are other recordings like this from the LP days, from the 78 days too, before any of us were, well, maybe not me, but you might enjoy that. But I want to back up a little bit and dive in here. You may have noticed on the screen back there that we had handwriting. That was Wagner's actual signature. You may have seen Richard Wagner, and also the word Parsifal. They were both in his handwriting. The actual score in his own handwriting is in the Wagner Museum in Bayreuth, Germany. But more on that in a moment. Let me put this next to you, Bob. There are Bobs on both sides of the room. Is it possible for us to see that Grail's Glocken? Because we were talking about that over here.
I can try to work my magic here.
This is the magician. I want to thank everybody in a moment, but that's Wagner, looking like Richard Burton in his last years. Here it is. Wagner wanted a certain sound to help escort the people who would be taking part in the Eucharist into Montsalvat, the castle where the Holy Grail is supposed to be in Spain. And he invented this instrument. It's called the Grail's Glocken. You may have to check my German. But can we hear that for a moment? There we go. I thought you should hear that again. That was the tune that was inviting you to come into the hall, into the sanctuary here. Adam, thanks for that generous introduction. Leah couldn't join us, but she helped us put together the poster, the flyer that went out. I want to thank her. Sarah, as always, faithfully here working the cameras and helping out in other ways. Thank you. Kate, where are you? There you are. Thanks for all you do. Kate instructs me on what to tell her to say, to play on the piano. And Tommy, where are you? Tommy will be helping us in a little while, and we sure hope Abby feels better tomorrow. Just like that. He'll be helping me with the Thunder Tube later. And thank you, the preparers of all the food back here. And most of all, Matt. Thank you. This is my director, my producer. You're out of time. We have too much to. You have to cut that. He makes everything magical happen back there. And thanks to the choir too, and for all of you who came out. There are some Wagner Society of New York material back there where there's a red candle. Feel free if you want to take a break, or if at the end of this marathon talk here, feel free to take the applications for the Wagner Society or any of the Wagner notes that are there. The books, leave them here. But anyway, I think it's interesting. That's I've returned them, And by the way, those of you who are not normally here, there are bathrooms back there, ladies' room straight back, and the men's room over here, but don't sneak out the door either. All right. Well, some of us talked about this before, but not all of us. What's opera to you? What kind of feel free to just speak freely. What do you know about the genre or the artistic genre, the stage performing thing called opera?
Well, I know it's not over till the fat ladies sing.
That's right. And there have been a lot of them at Wagner. God bless them, too. I'm working on my way up. Yes, Robert.
I didn't know hardly anything about it until the last series that you did, and I found out that learning a lot helps you enjoy it a lot.
Good. Yep. How would you define the genre?
I don't think I would.
Okay. Well, when we go to an opera, what do we expect? A story. There's usually a story. There are some avant-garde modern operas that are anti-stories, which is intriguing. But anyway, we expect a story, Bob.
Did you say a play?
Yeah.
Set the music.
Essentially a play set to music where they really strain their voices and diaphragms. Right? It's not like a musical, which can also take us to the heights, of course. But it's like a step up, if you will, with the power of voices, the power of music, even though there may be some spoken parts in opera too, as in Beethoven's only opera called Fidelio. A friend of mine, Kerry Kendall, has just released a film about Fidelio. I can tell you more about that another time. But he's traveling throughout the United States now, promoting his film about Fidelio and its connection with modern revolutionary movements. It's fascinating stuff. And an opera will have acts, won't it? You may have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Although there are one-act operas, they're just straight through without a break. And then people dive to the restrooms. But there are usually 3 acts in an opera. You know, Shakespeare may have had 5 acts, so they're generally a little bit shorter, except when you come to Richard Wagner. And about him, well, we've talked about him before, so I don't want to spend too much time. His main thing was composing operas, but he changed them to the name of music dramas, except for this one, Parsifal. He had another name for that. And that's him in about his 60s, roughly, when he was working on The Ring, which we talked about before. He worked on Parsifal from now he lived from 1813 until 1883. He was 69 years old when he passed away. His last couple of years were years of great struggle physically and artistically, though he had reached the peak of any artist's life with his fame and influence. But he had probably many attacks of what today we might call angina or full-blown heart attacks. So the last 2 or 3 years actually were rough on him. And some of these pictures show Wagner. That's his high school graduation. No. These are different pictures of Wagner throughout his life. Let's see. Now here, if we can hold that for a moment. He had many friends. He also had many enemies, some of which he created himself. But he had many friends, and you might remember Uncle Fritz. Anybody know this face? Yep, that's Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, 1844 to 1900, I think. Nietzsche was a young professor at Basel, which was not far from where Wagner was living at one time in the 1860s, 70 time period. And he befriended Wagner, who was about 25 years older than he. And they became very good friends, pals, many walks at sunset, talking about art, talking about music, and Nietzsche wrote a lot in support of Wagner's efforts to create this theater in a town called Bayreuth. But Nietzsche felt that he was losing himself in the power of the great maw of Wagner's personality. So they broke. One story is, and I'm a victim of what I've read, or some teacher told me, just like you are right now, he took a score of Brahms, who Wagner disliked, the composer Brahms, and put it on Wagner's piano. That's one way of ending a relationship. If you ever wonder, that's something to do. But anyway, they had a terrible falling out. However, decades, well, not too much later, maybe a decade later, Nietzsche trashed the opera Parsifal as a story, but then said, but has Wagner ever written anything more beautiful? The music was transcendent. And Wagner would pass before Nietzsche's mind snapped. It snapped in 1889, January of 1889. Why don't we take a look at, did we get through all the pictures? Okay. Oh, here we are. This is a great picture. This is Wagner near the end of his life. I think this is at Villa Vonfried in Bayreuth. It was the home that he and his family had. And you'll notice Wagner with the white hat on. And next to him is his wife, Cosima. However, Wagner was about a foot shorter than she, so he's standing on a higher step. And those are his three children. As you're looking, the bottom right is his son, Siegfried, who would live until 1930. And Wagner would die in 1883, but his wife, Cosima, who was 24 years younger than he, she lived, yes. She lived also until 1930. So the widow Wagner died, and their son died the same year, in 1930. And then the other two daughters there are Isolde and Eva. So Wagner, Cosima, his wife, and Richard Wagner had three children. First one born when Wagner was 59 years old. And the others are Cosima's children from her ex-husband, Hans von Bülow. Cosima, famous in her own right, she was the great composer and pianist Franz Liszt's daughter. So now here's Wagner with his son Siegfried, obviously in the dugout before a ball game. And it's kind of a touching picture. I think there's a human side to this man, too. This is Wagner with his wife, Cosima. Notice, she's seated. Because if she stood, she'd be looking way down on him. He had a little ego issue. It's a dramatic picture. She was incredibly devoted to him. Now, here are his operas. We looked at before, so I won't go through them all again. But you'll notice the first one, Die Feen, and the second one, Das Liebesverbot. They're rarely performed except as kind of curiosity pieces. But Rienzi's performed once in a while. The next one, The Flying Dutchman, you've probably heard of that. It's an ancient legend story. Tannhäuser has parallels to Parsifal in some ways, in that a man, main figure, is enamored of a number of women, or at least tempted by them, or they're trying to tempt him. In this early opera, Tannhäuser, and again in Parsifal, decades later. Then Lohengrin, which has the famous Here Comes the Bride music to it. And then we move to what we talked about last year, the four operas to the Ring. Tristan und Isolde was composed during that time period of working on the Ring. He got so far into Siegfried, he felt called emotionally back to the story of Tristan and Isolde, a powerful love story, that he stopped Siegfried and worked on Tristan and Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg, and then returned to Siegfried, a fully functioning master of his art. And then we come to Parsifal, where we are tonight. He didn't want Parsifal to be called an opera. He didn't want it to be called what he called his other works, music drama. You know, has to make special terms. Auf Deutsch. I mean, in German, too. I don't know what all it means. But he called Parsifal. Now, Lisa, you're studying German. Surely you can pronounce that just easily.
You want me to give it a go?
Give it a go. Go for gusto. That's what I think. All right. So now I don't have to try to say it. I think you've got it. Bühnen, Vi or V? Is it?
Vi.
Is Vi with the I a second? That's so you say the I? Okay. Bühnen, Vi, Festspiel. Which in English roughly translates as a sacred stage festival play. A sacred stage festival play. Well, it's a sui generis. It's the only one we know of. He made up the name for it. And what he wanted was that Parsifal would be performed only at the theater he created, Bayreuth. Nowhere else. Because he was afraid people would ruin it or, make it less than what he thought it was. And also because he wanted to have money available for his family after he was gone. He knew he didn't have much time left. Parsifal was premiered in 1882. People from around the world came to see it, and he died in February of 1883 in Venice, Italy. But he was trying to do that. And there's kind of an applause issue about Parsifal, the stage play. When it was first performed, after the first act at Bayreuth, people clapped. Second act, people clapped. Wagner spoke to the audience and said, I really don't want them to come out for curtain calls. In German, and people didn't understand him. So when the opera ended, nobody clapped. And he said, now I don't know if they like it or not. He didn't know what to do. So traditionally, because of that misunderstanding, he just wanted to focus on the artist rather than applause. But he wanted to hear the applause, but it didn't happen. So there are customs about that. In Bayreuth, for years, no one would applaud after the opera, or no one would applaud after the first act. And that custom wound up in the New York Metropolitan Opera. Parsifal is often performed around Easter, April, end of March, somewhere in there, because of the nature of its subject. And after the first act, no one would applaud. That was the rule until the year 2013. Now they said, applaud whenever you want. So that's a little bit on him, but there's an applause issue there. There's kind of a comic thing. Do I need another mic? Oh, okay. Well, why don't we take a look at this thing called Bayreuth briefly. This is the theater Wagner created, designed, and built himself. Well, not by himself, with help. The first time ever, and only time ever, a theater has been built for one artist. And to this day, every year, over 500,000 people try to get tickets for it. The waiting list is 5 to 10 years, depending on the opera. Like Tristan und Isolde might, take 10 years to get in to see that. I'm not sure which one, really. But this is it from the outside. In the town of Bayreuth, which is, I think, northwest of Munich, we have a shot of the interior. Isn't that magnificent? To this day, that's what it looks like. And down front on the stage, you have what he created. Remember, I talked about this before, the orchestra pit. He wanted to have the invisible orchestra. Not an orchestra that would be on the stage or in the way of the performers, but sunken down. So you could focus on the drama or comedy on the stage. That's used around the world to this day. But he did something different. I don't understand acoustics well, but he had the violins off to the right side. Here's the conductor. The violins are over here. Usually they're over here when you watch a symphony, an orchestra. I'm not sure exactly how that worked out with the acoustics, but it was better for his work. So there we are. Now the libretto, those are the words of any opera. Wagner was the first composer who made it to write his own words. He would first write a draft of a prose story, write it out in prose like a short story, and then he would gradually turn, if he was really motivated, because there were many works he never completed, then he would turn his attention to writing the words that each singer would sing, or chorus would sing, and stage directions. Well, those words are the libretto. And often when you go to an opera today, the words of the libretto will be on the back of the seat in front of you so you can read the English translation, whatever the opera is. Whatever language the opera is, doesn't matter. Sometimes they used to be broadcast above the stage so people were craning their necks, so they stopped that. But I'm not sure how it's done everywhere, of course. Now, Kate, pretty soon you're on. We're going to hear in a little while the prelude to Parsifal, sometimes called the overture to Parsifal. Now, an overture basically usually is before the opera starts, or even a play, there's music that may include some of the melodies, or in Wagner's case, melodies and leitmotifs in it. So it gives you kind of a taste for what's to come. But you can have an overture for a play, too, like Beethoven's Egmont Overture before the play Egmont, written by Goethe. We just have this musical thing for 15 minutes, and then we go into the play and don't hear another bit of music. But for Wagner, the Parsifal prelude or overture is really exquisite. We'll hear part of that today. The prelude is usually before an act, but it's used interchangeably for the first act of Parsifal. And now, something called the Leitmotifs. We're going to talk with Kate's help on that. Remember the Leitmotif idea? Oh, good. You nodded. Now you have to tell us. You're trapped. Yes, you did. I was a teacher for many years, and if I would throw out a question, there were two things that would happen if a student didn't know. He would look down praying, don't call me. Or she would look up and say, if I look right at him, he won't call me because he'll think I know.
Well, I think it's a musical piece that kind of signifies the person talking, or the character.
Yeah.
Like when Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, right. There's a leitmotif. That's a great example. I couldn't have said it better myself. And it also may stand for a theme, like the theme of revenge, the theme of fate. So it's a melody, you might say, that stands for someone or something. They exist in Parsifal too, but they're kind of hard to really delineate. Unlike the Ring operas, oh, that's the Ring, or that's the Fate, or that's the Siegfried motif or melody. With Parsifal, it's kind of hard to find them. But Kate and I have selected some. And before we do that, we should note the Dresden Amen, composed by a fellow named Johann Gottlieb Naumann in about 1801, became very popular and is used to this day. We heard it at the end of the Sing Me Now of Christmas a little while ago. But here's how it is by itself. That's it. Basically, it's 7 notes. Can we hear it again? Thank you. Thank you, Kate. That's great. Well, Wagner took that commonly known motif, melody, the Amen. It follows many Protestant and Catholic, now Catholic hymns too. They're all incorporated together. And changed that and uses that throughout the opera with many variations. For instance, there's the faith motif. Thank you. It's kind of a variation. Now, there's a bad guy in the opera. If you don't have a bad guy, bad woman in the story, what's the point? His name is Klingsor. Parsifal is the star of the show. Second billing is Amfortas, or maybe Kundry, the woman. And then there's Gurnemans. He's up there too. But there's a bad guy named Klingsor. Do we have his motif?
We do.
Oh, good. Snidely Whiplash from the old Bullwinkle show. Oh, I guess I'm really dating myself now. How boring it would be to date oneself. But anyway, and then we have the beautiful Parsifal motif. That's okay. And that symbolizes Parsifal when he's younger. He's an idiot. He's just full. He's asked, "Who are you? Where are you from?" I don't know. Who's your mother? I don't know. Who's your father? I don't know. Where are you from? I don't know. What are you doing here? I don't know. Everything is I don't know, as we'll hear. Who's doing Act 1? Summarizing that. Okay, Josh, right? Yeah. Are you going to mention that? Yeah. Now you are. Right. Anyway, so, and the melody for Parsifal later will be a little more sophisticated. And then there are 2 moments in the whole opera where we walk from outdoors somewhere and we go into the castle of Montsalvat for the Grail ceremony. And that's when Wagner uses the Grailsglocken, that boom, 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 and this, the entrance to the castle and Grail sanctuary. Can you do it again? Thank you. That's great. You can feel people marching. Thank you, Kate. Let's hear for Kate. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go right to Parsifal. We've heard some of the leitmotifs. He created Parsifal out of several other books. And while there are modern productions that have some controversy to them, we're going to do a Parsifal that is kind of PG or G rated for the nature of our audience here. But there's for lack of a better word, romance involved. But he started, the basic idea came from Gottfried von Eschenbach's Parsifal, a work that was written in the early part of the 13th century. And also from Chrétien du Troyes' 12th century Parsifal. By the way, this is not the original manuscript from the 13th century. I tried to get it, but it was the library had it. Somebody had it out of the library, I mean. And also, interestingly enough, part of Parsifal comes out of his studies of Buddhism, as well as Christianity, his readings of Schopenhauer, and his own thinking about what compassion, redemption might mean, and how the Eucharist might work in terms of that. This is Wagner's take on the Grail, what communion is, what redemption, etc. are. So we're not preaching the Wagner doctrine of Christianity here, which probably you won't find anywhere but in this work, essentially. So we take a look at his look at compassion, forgiveness, redemption, eroticism, and much more. He took from many sources, not just the Bible. We don't have to agree with him on these topics, but the music. Whatever the story is, sometimes you just think, I don't know if it matters. The music is transcendently beautiful. As Nietzsche said, this opera is horrible. Wagner has become pious. But has he ever written any more beautiful music? So, you know some of this music. In the movie Excalibur, made in 1981 or 82, there's a scene where the knight is seeking the Grail and gets it. And then he brings it to the person who needs to drink from it, and we hear Wagner's music from Parsifal in that scene. And it's in other places, too. We're going to show that, but we don't have enough time, but you can find the entire movie Excalibur online now. But why don't we go right into this? The composer began composing at the piano. This is obviously a modern rendition of a piano form transcription, a piano transcription of the beginning of the overture. Any one of us could do that. But so this gentleman took the orchestral score, we think, and transcribed it for piano, or maybe borrowed one that I think Franz Liszt made, or the original from Wagner. We don't know. I don't know. Somebody does, I'm sure. But isn't that amazing? My wife said to me one time when we first watched this together, she said, well, you could play that. Maybe for the first 15 seconds. Then as soon as he does those arpeggios, yeah, I'm gone. Forget it. Well, let's take a look at the score. This is one page in Wagner's handwriting of the score from Parsifal. Now, what we want to remember, and I think I showed this to you when we did go to Dammerung, is that this is one page that would include for the orchestra what the violins are doing, the violas are doing, the cello, the trumpets, the Wagner tuba, the harps, you go on and on, the timpani, and voices. And all of this one page may last less than a minute. It's why he took about 5 years to compose it. Also dealing with trying to raise money for the Bayreuth festivals because the place had to be built. King Ludwig II helped him immeasurably, but there was a point where Ludwig said, "I can't help you anymore. You have to raise more money." Well, he was very ill, but he did it, and still composed. It's amazing. That's about a minute's worth. Why don't we now go to the prelude to Parsifal itself? By the way, this is the Flower Maiden scene. I've forgotten why we have the...
There's a little Icelandic scene first.
Oh, okay, right. Well, we can watch this for a while. No, anyway, what we're going to do is have you just listen, and I'll shut up. So, to some of the prelude to Parsifal, also called the Overture to Parsifal. I like the prelude. And I found a thing on YouTube of an Icelandic scene. So perhaps for 4 or 5 minutes, we can kind of clear our heads, thinking of no characters, no conflicts. Maybe some words will appear on the screen to reflect upon as we listen to this prelude with a video from Iceland. Yeah, thanks a lot. My director. Here are scenes from different stagings of the opera, random. More on that later. You heard the Dresden Amen in there, and variations of it. And the words compassion, redemption, Eucharist, and Grail. What is the Grail or the Holy Grail in your experience of reading and films and what have you? What do you consider it? What have you learned about what the Holy Grail is or the Grail is? Kate?
Supposedly it was the cup used in the Last Supper, and I think possibly also used at the crucifixion to catch the blood from Christ's side, transported by Joseph of Arimathea supposedly to Britain.
Yeah, that's a common idea. Any other thoughts on the Grail? I mean, there's been recent movies.
Doesn't it bring Sean Connery back to life?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we wish, and he's going to play James Bond again. Yep. It has healing powers to it, perhaps magical powers. I like to think of it, it's possibly that the cup from which Christ shared the Last Supper or the communion, and maybe the same cup was used to catch the blood from Christ's wounds. We have to be careful when we go back to what does the Bible say. But these legendary things or religious things, you have to decide, are interesting. I like to think, too, it might be that thing that we all kind of seek. It may be God, Christ. It may be Allah. It may be, you have to decide. It's that thing we all seek, the meaning, the purpose. That can be something it is, too. But here it will be that cup from which Christ shared the Last Supper and which also Joseph of Arimathea used to catch the blood of Jesus. And during a trip to Italy in early 1882, I think, Wagner went to Siena. And I think we have a picture of the Duomo, the cathedral in Siena, which my wife and I visited some 14 years ago. I don't remember. And I had hair. It was a long time ago. And Wagner hadn't really quite designed his set for the scenes of the Holy Grail itself, the Grail ceremony. He was with the artist Paul Yukowski, and they went inside of the Duomo, and Wagner noticed these columns and said, "This is it. Can you make sketches of this?" And Yukowski made sketches. That's what I want for the Grail Hall. Notice the columns. They're a recurring theme, even in modern productions where there ain't no columns, of this idea that Wagner had. And they went back to, he spent his winters in Italy, and in the summer of '82, he produced Parsifal, and it was put on. Josh, you're on. We're going to hear some more music, but Josh is going to tell us about Act 1. What happened? Oh.
Alrighty, so for scene 1 of Act 1, the setting for Parsifal opens in the forest near the sanctuary of the Holy Grail. So an elder knight, Gurnemanz, along with 2 other knights, are doing morning prayers. Their king, Amfortas, was wounded by the Holy Spear, which, according to the legend of this play, opera, and other legends, was the spear that pierced the side of Jesus Christ at the crucifixion. And so this wound was unfortunately turned out to be incurable. The other knights are then preparing a bath for King Amfortas. So this setting is interrupted by the sudden arrival of an ageless woman named Kundry. At first, the other knights think that she is some kind of evil pagan witch. She is acting on the Grail's as the Grail's messenger, and she brings medicine, according to what she says, from Arabia for the king. Gurnemanz doesn't allow the knights to do her harm and grants her safety. So the king, once brought up by the other knights, muses on the terms of the prophecy given to him, that his salvation would come from a pure fool, enlightened by compassion. So that's the prophecy given to then cure his incurable wound. This setting is interrupted. After this, we get a little backstory. Gurnemanz explains the story of Amfortas, the Holy Spear, and his wound, along with Klingzer, the evil knight mentioned earlier. At the time, Klingzer is a sorcerer who is trying to destroy the Knights of the Grail. The Grail, according to the legend, the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper, and the spear that pierced his body were guarded by Amfortas' father, Titurel, and his company of knights. One knight, however, namely Klingzer, wanted to join the company, but because of his impurity and sin, he was denied. He vainly tried to purify himself by castration, but this only led him down a path of further evil. He spiraled downward until he became a vile sorcerer, bent on destroying the knights he had sought to join. He also then erected a castle that housed a magical garden full of seductive women to ensnare other knights. Unfortunately, Amfortas fell into this trap, and which allowed Klingzer the opportunity to steal the Holy Spear from Amfortas and then stab him with it. This set the condition of Amfortas' prophesied cure, that he could only be healed by an innocent youth. So after this little flashback, back in the forest clearing, a swan falls to earth, having been shot with an arrow. A young man, boasting of his apparent archery skills, is apprehended by the knights and is swiftly rebuked by Gurnemanz. The man feels shame for his deed after hearing Gurnemanz, and in fact, he cannot even bring forth an excuse as to why he shot down the swan, or even tell his name. The simple man seems to only be able to remember the name Herzeleid. I believe that's how you might say it in German. Translated as heart's sorrow, which is the name of his mother. The old woman Kundry, who is still there, gives a little info dump about the man's backstory, how his father died in battle, how the mother raised the boy in a forest, and then also died. Moving on, the young man then joins Gurnemanz and the company at the Banquet of the Grail, which is a feast held in order to renew the knight's immortality. Also, Gurnemanz is starting to wonder if this youngster could be the prophecy's fulfillment. Seems a little bit foolish, but he's not sure if he's the right fool. At the feast, Titurel tries to get Amfortas, his son, to uncover the Grail, but he doesn't want to. Even looking at the Holy Grail gives Amfortas great pain. Titurel eventually gets a servant to uncover it anyway, and the whole feast hall glows with light. The young man drinks it all in, but he doesn't seem to have a clue about anything going on around him. According to Gurnemanz, this lack of understanding might indicate that the youth is not the prophesied one. Gurnemanz is a little miffed after the feast since his hopes have fallen flat. As the scene fades, the prophecy is reiterated. In the next scene, we open with Tuturel demanding Amphitrite step up and get his act together and perform his kingly duty by uncovering the Grail himself. By neglecting this office, Amphitrite is now keeping Tuturel, the aging, retired king, from the immortality-giving chalice and the blood of Christ inside it. Amphitrite is deeply ashamed and is grieved by his own legacy as the one who failed, and in sinning, lost the Holy Spear by which he received this incurable wound. The sight of the Grail still pains him greatly, but even now the young man seems to share in Amphitrite's pain. He shows this by clutching violently at his heart, while Amphitrite is also suffering. Eventually, Amphitrite is persuaded to reveal the Grail, which sheds light in their dining hall and makes bread and wine appear before them. Towards the end of the feast, after everyone else had left, the only two left are Gurnemanz and the young man. Gurnemanz questions him, hoping that the youth might have an ounce of sense or wisdom to redeem him. But the young man still understood nothing of what just happened. Gurnemanz's hopes are now fully dashed, and he exiles the young man from the realm with a warning about any further swan killing. He is convinced now that the youth is only a simple fool. And that is the end of Act 1.
Bravo. Bravo. Wagner had some kind of a thing for swans. There's a swan in Lohengrin also. And that swan is not killed, but I think I told you, I'm not sure. In one performance of Lohengrin, by the way, is 13 available?
This one?
Well, hold on to that one. That's the first cast of Parsifal in 1882. Yeah. And we're going to hear this in a moment. But the actor, the tenor portraying Lohengrin, is supposed to step on stage onto the swan and go back to wherever he's from. Long story.
We don't have 13, sorry.
Okay, it's all right. And to go back. But the tenor got so into his singing, the swan came around, on a conveyor belt or something, went past him. And so the tenor looked and turned to the audience and said, "Does anyone know when the next swan arrives?" He just broke the fourth wall of theater. I don't know what they did after that, but that's a great story, I think. Thank you, Josh. That was great. There's something interesting, and Roger Scruton talks about it in his book. I haven't read the whole thing. I thought, no, I got to back off and just stick to this for now. But Gurnemanz tells Parsifal near the end of Act 1, before they go into the Grail ceremony, time becomes space here, which is a mind-boggling concept. Time becomes space here. And Scruton writes about that. I don't know. You have to decide what it might mean. But everything is now forever when we're here in the Grail ceremony. The eternal present is here. So, let's go to 14 then. Okay. Here's Gurnemanz. And this is a set designed by Wagner's grandson, Wolfgang, who died, I forgot when. This is the swan moment. I think. That's who we need to redeem everyone. That was Kundry who was lying there, and she just came to life again. Wait till you see the swan, the dead swan. And here comes Parsifal. He's a little bit like Siegfried. I'm the greatest archer in the world. I did it. It was great. He has no idea of sacredness or anything. And then he's questioned, who are you, and so forth, and he knows nothing. He knows nothing. So they think he's the fool. And Gurnemans, this fellow, thinks he might be the fool that will redeem Amfortas from his suffering, and Kundry, her suffering. Kundry has been cursed for almost 2,000 years because, according to the story, the legend, she was there for the crucifixion of Christ, but laughed. And she's cursed to suffer new life every day, but suffering life every day, but turns her attention to the erotic to try to escape. And that's part of her curse, too. Now, here's a little bit of the first transformation scene where we're now going from the outside to the inside of the castle. Well, go back to 1882. What kind of techniques did they have to change scenery? Certainly nothing like today. Wagner had to compose extra music so they would have time to change the scene. And during the original rehearsals for Parsifal in 1882, Wagner didn't know this at the time, but Engelbert Humperdinck, the young composer who would eventually go on to write the opera Hansel and Gretel, he had to write some more bars of music so they had enough time to change the scene. He showed it to Wagner, and Wagner approved. They couldn't believe it. He approved it. But so here's one of the, well, just a little bit of the transformation scene as we go from outdoors to indoors. He's learned about his mother from Kundry now. She looks a little old. Okay. So now we've moved from outside to inside. We're saving some time. but you want to hear that music. Notice the imitation columns that Wagner picked up on in the Duomo in Siena, in a relatively modern version. Gordemans with Parsifal, and hear the Grails glocken. Grails glocken, I guess. This is a Bayreuth production. The knights preparing to celebrate the Eucharist with the Holy Grail. Some of Wagner's most stirring music. We'll hear it again at the end. Well, I think it's time to hear a little bit about Act 2. The Grail ceremony occurs, and as Josh said, he told us, it doesn't move our friend Parsifal at all. Where's Tim?
He's right here.
Oh, okay. Well, can Tim come up?
He can.
All right, good. Here is Act 2. Timothy Krill.
Act 2 starts with the evil Klingzor in his dark tower, and he summons Kundry to him and tells her that she must seduce Parsifal. Now, she doesn't want to, and she tries to resist Klingzor's command, but she's under the curse, and by using that curse, Klingzor is able to compel her to do what he asks of her. So she ends up going to a magical garden that Josh had mentioned earlier, where Parsifal is. And there's a bunch of flower maidens in this garden who are also trying to seduce Parsifal. And they're trying to woo him with their feminine wiles. And Parsifal plays with them but isn't really seduced by them or tempted by them. But then Kundry appears and attempts, as now transformed as a beautiful siren. She attempts to pull him away, and she triggers memories of his childhood and his mother. And at a certain point, it seems that his will has been broken and he is about to be seduced by her, and she offers to kiss him passionately. But at that moment, Parsifal recoils in horror, and at that moment understands the nature of King Amorphotas's King Amorphotas's the nature of his wound and his own suffering, and also understands at that moment what Parsifal's mission is supposed to be. Kundry realizes that her moment of triumph, actually being able to seduce him, has moved on, and she pleads with him and tries to get him to pity her and to seduce him. Because of her curse, she tries to get pity for that. But she realizes that her plans are falling apart and calls on Klingzor to come and redeem the situation, or not redeem it, the opposite of redeeming it, as it would be. And Klingzor comes with the spear and attempts to throw it at Parsifal. He throws it, and the spear stops in the air, just suspended over Parsifal's head. He grasps at it and makes the sign of the cross and is able to take the spear away. At this point, Klingzor's great tower crumbles, and the entire garden around them withers and dies. And he tells Kundry that she will know where to find him again later. And then he walks away. And that is the end of part 2.
Act 2. Bravo. Can we have a couple minutes of 17? That's the Flower Maidens. Here are the Flower Maidens in one production, just for a couple minutes, trying to seduce Parsifal in the garden of Klingzor. He doesn't know what's going on. He has no clue. You see him standing at the bottom left, mystified. There you go. And so Kundry shows up. They all flee. They get nowhere with him. She shows up.
You want to show that other picture?
Oh, yes. By the way, here's a very modern production of that same scene with a hot tub. Somebody's trying to be modern. I don't know. Thank you. Here's Kundry doing her thing. Notice how much younger she looks here. Notice the music. Mystical. Somehow, by kissing Kundry, who has been cursed and she laughed at Jesus suffering on the cross, he realizes what the pain is in Amorphotas. Well, she happened to be the one to seduce Amorphotas long ago when Klingzor then grabbed the spear and stabbed him. So that may be part of it. But I have a tough time thinking, how do you go from a kiss to feeling another man's pain? I don't know. But anyway, I think that's what's happened. He realizes because she kissed Amfortas before. Now, we're going to go to the end of Act 2. We have two scenes from this. This is where Kundry will ask for the bad guy, Klingsor's help. And the throw of the spear is great. She's really mad at Parsifal now. She turns Parsifal over to Klingsor. This is another production. I know it is. That's the spear that stabbed Jesus and Amfortas. Pause. Tommy, we have work to do. Now, I'm going to tap you on the shoulder when it's ready.
Okay, how do you work this?
Well, it's a very difficult thing. I've had many years of lessons for this. You try it. This is a rehearsal. Okay. Just don't hurt you or me. Okay, so let's watch the screen when the bad guy throws the spear at Parsifal. And it's going to be a little while, and then pretty soon when Parsifal holds a spear up and makes the sign of the cross, Klingsor's castle is going to collapse and there's thunder, and that's you.
Okay.
Okay. Wow, that was fast. Listen to the music. Stand back. That's the bad guy. Excellent. There's one more moment in a different thing. And Parsifal will say to her, "You will know where to find me." Notice the hint of the columns again. All right. I found a cartoon version. I'll tap you again.
Die Zauberburg versinkt in der Erde.
Let's hear it for Tom. Thank you, Thomas. Now we go to Act 3. And it's actually many years later, so when he says, "You'll know where to find me," she must have a great memory. You're on, Hannah. Thank you for doing this. And Josh, thanks for the mic. This is Hannah Pote.
So Act 3 begins with Gurnemanz, now old and living as a hermit, finds Kundry collapsed and unconscious outside his hut. As he awakes her with water from the holy spring, armored knights approach out of the forest, and Gurnemanz recognizes Parsifal, the man who shot the swan. He carries with him the holy spear and tells of his journey to find Amfortas and the Grail. Gurnemanz informs him that Tudorel has died, and that Amfortas has refused to uncover the Grail in his despair. Parsifal is anointed with water from the holy spring. Kundry washes his feet, and Gurnemanz proclaims him king. Parsifal baptizes Kundry as his first regal act and is suddenly overwhelmed by the beauty of nature around them. Gurnemanz explains that the world always becomes purified and renewed on Good Friday, which it so happens to be. Titterel's funeral takes place in the Castle of the Grail. Mourning processions of knights carry Titterel's coffin, the Grail, and Amfortas on his litter into the Hall of the Grail. The desperate knights beg Amfortas to keep his promise and uncover the Grail, but going wild in his anguish, he refuses again and beseeches the knights to kill him and end his suffering and shame. Suddenly, Parsifal appears and heals the wound and the sins of Amfortas by touching him with the same weapon that first wounded him, the Holy Spear. Parsifal returns Amfortas to his kingly office, and the Grail is unveiled, then to remain uncovered forever. Kundry is released from her curse, falls dead on the ground, gazing at Parsifal as he raises the Grail in blessing over the redeemed knighthood.
Excellent. Bravo. Bravo. Hannah Hope. Thank you, Hannah. I was thinking, Matt, why don't we just go to 22? Okay. Interestingly enough, Gurnemans will baptize Parsifal. This is years later. Parsifal will turn and baptize Kundry. The beginning of her redemption is at hand. And some versions, what Wagner said is, when Parsifal touches Amfortas' wound with a spear, Amfortas is healed. Well, it's over here. No, it's here. And when, at that moment too, Kundry just falls lifeless, dead, she's redeemed now. She's free of the curse because she laughed at Christ. But in some modern versions, they change that so that Amfortas is fine and Kundry is fine, and they just go off together. They just leave. Or in one version, I saw Amfortas dies and Kundry's fine. So they changed what Wagner wrote, but I think they both still work. You get the idea of some kind of redemption. So this is Daniel Barenboim's transition. He's conducting the Grail scene. And, sorry, let me try again. I spent a lot of money to get my stomach fixed. Now my mouth doesn't work. We're going from outside, inside, in a very avant-garde modern setting. We're going to where the columns should be again, but now they're horizontal. It's interesting. We'll just watch a little bit of this. Barenboim is conducting in Berlin, the Berlin State Opera, in this version. And he didn't design the set. I just forgot who did. And a man named Kupfer designed the sets. And Barenboim retired just 1 year ago, this month, because of health reasons, unspecified. Brilliant. And he was a Jewish man who tried to conduct some Wagner in Israel, and there was a lot of controversy. But about 12 years ago, he conducted an orchestra in the Gaza Strip to try to bring peace between the two parties that are now quite actively at war. So this is it. Notice this modern version. I love it. Here come the Knights of the Grail. Well, soon. That's my EKG. The Grail's Glocken, my favorite instrument. And here come the Knights of the Grail, many years later from the Act Two. The heaviness of the music. There's a tragedy here, but about to be changed. Let's go backwards to Siegfried Jerusalem again in a traditional production for the last 6 minutes. As Hannah said, Parsifal will heal Amfortas' wound. Amfortas is brought out on the stretcher, suffering terribly. His father, Titurel, who most productions you never see, is just a voice somewhere, who kept telling Amfortas, open the Grail, do the ceremony. Well, he's dead now. His casket is often brought out, and then we're going to go to 23B. Matt, can we do that? Did I send that to you? I hope. Okay, good. And this is Siegfried Jerusalem, and I just forgot who Kundry is. This is the last 6 minutes, and what has happened now is the miracle of redemption. Amfortas is fine. Kundry has passed, finally at rest. And what you're going to hear is the choir singing this over and over again. Miracle of supreme salvation, our Redeemer. Wagner never says Jesus, never says Christ. He either says Redeemer or Messiah. And he says, the chorus sings, miracle of supreme salvation, our Redeemer redeemed. And we hear the last music of Richard Wagner. 6 minutes. We're done. Unfortunately, we have it translated into Spanish for you. There's a hint of the columns again. Wagner would live another 7 months after this, and he would die in this villa in Venice. Part of it is a museum today. It was built in the 15th century, and there's a plaque right here about this is the place where Wagner died, February 13th, 1883. And his funeral was, the King Ludwig said, he belongs to me. I want to take charge, but the family, the widow and the children and friends took over. And he's buried in Bayreuth. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Joukowsky's last sketch of Wagner the night before he died. Wagner was reading, and Joukowsky did a quick sketch of him. Joukowsky. And this is where Wagner's buried in Bayreuth. And in 1930, his widow would be buried there with him. The grave, unmarked, Wagner said, "They will know where I am." Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I may have kept you up a little late. I'm sorry I did, but it was a joy to share this.
Oh,